Hi, Drawing One students. This week you're going to be doing a series of about 12 blind contour drawings. And what that means is that you are going to be drawing an object and we're going to use our hands without actually looking at your paper. So what happens is you look completely, almost all of the time, at your hand. So they call it a blind contour drawing because you're not actually looking at your paper. So this is an example of a blind contour drawing, and I wanted to just quickly show you, what this is actually like. So, what you're going to be doing as you're looking at your hand, you're kind of going on a visual journey, and maybe you'll get some wrinkles that you want to draw, so you'll kind of wander in, and maybe there's some wrinkles around the knuckles. So, I mean, some of this really does look pretty accurate, but I assure you, this is one that I did. I was not looking as I made this journey all around my hand. And it's slow, and you can see that the line is continuous. And that's because if I pick up my marker, I really won't know sort of where I left off. So, but at some point in this, you may say, all right, wait a second, I'm a little lost. I'm all the way over here. Where were the wrinkles in my knuckles? And you may actually have to let go for a second, glance at your paper for a nanosecond, and go back in and then resume again without looking at your paper. So sometimes it's just a repositioning. Like suppose I got through this part, I'd have to quickly glance at my paper so I knew to put my pencil here, and then sure enough, I would start going again without looking at my paper. So you see this is a continuous line, and then maybe I'd be like, oh my gosh, where does my other knuckle start? So maybe I'd have to glance for a half a second so I'd know to start up here. All right, so I think you're going to get the idea. And here's an example of another hand that I drew using this blind contour technique. And as I'm going to sort of do the same thing I did in the last slide as we talk. If you have to jump just like a quarter of an inch, you don't really need to stop and look at your paper. Okay, so I'm just doing this, and as I'm talking, you can just listen for a minute, because what I'm doing is, I want to talk to you about this left brain versus right brain. As you're doing this and you're drawing, like I may actually have a hard time talking because my left brain is in charge of speech. And what I'm doing here is I am using my right brain to actually draw and trace this as we're talking. So there is this idea that the left brain is in control. It's the cognitive side, and the right brain is the creative side. So what can happen is the left brain does not like that you are not actually looking at your paper and you're just looking at your hand. And that's because the left brain wants to be in control. It doesn't seem to make sense. And really, we want the right brain to do its thing here. Now here, watch this, guys. I'm at a spot where I have to make a decision of where to go. Now, here's a moment where you would look at your paper, maybe move your pencil to about right here, and then you could keep drawing this finger, okay? So another thing that the left brain does, because it likes to be in control, is it gives you a hard time when you are not letting it be in control. For example, if you're doing this and you're saying, this makes no sense, why do we have to do this? How could it possibly come out good if I'm not looking at my paper? So I want you to just sort of think of that as left brain chatter. And I want you to let yourself not listen to it. And then after a while, when that left brain finds out you're just not going to listen to any of its negative speak about what you're doing, it will just simply check out, and it will let the right brain take over. And then you're in what I call art mode. So here's a moment where you have to say, oh my gosh, how am I going to do the thumb? What am I going to do? Whoops. I think it's okay to move your pencil. Just take a quick look at your page, move your pencil over to where the thumb starts, but then you must look away again. Because this whole practice of doing this blind contour, it gives you a special kind of line. Oops, I'm going to then move over here. That is continuous. It's a meandering line. It almost comes from I think it does. It comes from your subconscious. It comes from a place in your right brain, and you don't want to rob yourself of that experience. So for that reason, I'm going to tell you to please be strict and don't look at your paper unless it's just to quickly jump to another spot in your drawing of the hand that's kind of far away, and it would be hard to judge it if you didn't just quickly in a nanosecond glance at your paper. As you can see, the last two hands are incorporated in this larger composition. So these are each 3-minute blind contour drawings, which I drew with a purple Sharpie. If you want to use a colored Sharpie, you can. A black Sharpie is great. And that also may feel a little uncomfortable because we can't erase, right? But you're going to have to use a Sharpie. Fine line is okay, but if it's a bigger or medium line is better. Just remember, we're not looking at our page, so we don't really care how it comes out. But we do care that we can see our line, so that's why we're going to use a Sharpie. And you wouldn't be erasing anyway, because we're not fixing and looking at our paper. You are going to use your 18 by 24 watercolor paper, and you're going to do altogether anywhere from 10 to 12 of these blind contour drawings, and let them even meander into each other and superimpose themselves on one another. Here's another example of a blind contour drawing hand that I drew. And I just wanted to let you know that you are going to be tempted to look at your page as you're doing this. But I'm going to ask you to please resist that. It's going to be that left brain thing again. And I want you to feel, as you are drawing the contour of your hand, that it's as if you're actually touching the edge of what you draw. And it's as if you're traveling over a landscape with hills and valleys and little streams that you could think maybe are wrinkles. You're just going to be kind of going on a visual journey. And I want you to please don't let your pen get any farther ahead than exactly what you're seeing. And I'll be able to tell if you do. I just know it's a different type of line. So you're just going to be moving at a slow and even pace. Now, in the process of these blind contour drawings, you're going to find that you will, without even knowing it, run into an overlap over another drawing that you've previously done. That's a good thing. That controlling left brain does not like it when you overlap something. It's almost like the left brain's afraid you're going to wreck it. So that's another reason why it's important not to look at your page. And the other thing you're going to see in the reading you did this week is that drawing professors have found that students who do this exercise progress better in their drawings. So one of the reasons for that, I believe, is that this is getting you in the habit of looking at what you see rather than looking at your paper. We tend to want to fix and correct and all that without realizing that if we could just look at what we see and draw what we see rather than maybe symbolically what we think we see or what we believe we know in our minds, that our drawings come out better. I think it also kind of activates your subconscious and gets you in touch with your creative source. And then there's that wonderful feeling of childlike wonder when you're done with your 3-minute pose and you look at it and Sometimes you laugh, sometimes you think it's crazy, but usually it's very interesting, and it's like a different point of view that you might not have been able to do if you were in that left brain sense of control. Now, the end result, when you have all of these drawings overlapping one another, is a sense of transparency and seeing through the form. And then also you get states of motion, so that it's almost like you have multiple states, so that there's a feeling that this hand is sort of moving in space and changing positions. And, if you look closely at some of these things, they're not in great proportion or whatever, right? Some of them are crazier than others. If you go the whole 3 minutes, that's good. If you draw for two minutes or 1 minute and think, oh, I'm done, I'm going to tell you to go back and look at those hands even more closely, because you're not finding enough detail. Like if you go inside the hand, there's bones, there's wrinkles on the knuckles, there's wrinkles on the wrist. You may have a ring on your finger, or you may have a watch on. You can include that as well. The other thing about hands that's really great to work with is they are directional. So what does that actually mean? So just by virtue of having fingers, they kind of point in different directions. So that propels your eye through the composition in different ways. And then because of the overlapping, like we said, you get that transparency. And I'm going to have you eventually paint these using your transparent watercolor. So you'll get to experiment with colors, and if an area in your drawing overlaps and makes a shape here that's different than here, you get to change colors. And so I really want you to kind of be experimental with this. Although you're going to be working with hands for this particular project, just for the reasons I described in the last slide, you can do a blind contour drawing of anything. And often if we're starting on a project where we're working on a certain subject, I'll ask you to do just a 3 or a 6 minute blind contour, just to get yourself into that subconscious right brain mode. And often if it's the first day of class, I'll have students pick a partner, and then we'll do a couple of 3-minute blind contour portraits of one another. So this portrait by a student named Jillian, I can tell that she really didn't look at the page, not just so much because of the way the drawing came out, but the quality of the line. Even though there are a couple of little lines all together, I could just tell they're very, they're one stroke. They are, they just seem like, they're just continuous. It just has a certain look to it, I can tell. Here's another portrait by another student. And you see again, it's a continuous line. The chin doesn't line up with the collar or the shoulders. So I can just tell, I mean, these are things that your left brain would never let you do. I can tell that this is a blind contour drawing. But what I find about it that's interesting is that it becomes so creative. It has something that one wouldn't do if they really were in control, There's an artist named, not Raoul Dubuffet, who was a French artist, who said that common sense is the opposite of creativity. And he came up with some very interesting things, as you might guess. So this represents a blind contour of a student that I did while we were doing that, first day of class activity where we're drawing each other. And, how many profiles can you find in here? I think there's at least 4 or 5 drawings in here that I just drew over and over again. So, yeah, I mean, this is a blind contour drawing, or, that moment when you have to relocate your pencil. We call that modified blind contour, but in general. That's what it is. So I like the idea that there's so many drawings here and so many times I drew the hand drawing something that it gets a feeling of motion to it. Now this is a blind contour drawing that a student did of me. So, you know, it's funny. It's different. It's almost like a cartoon that you couldn't think of yourself without being in some type of right brain creative subconscious mode. So I thought you might like to see that. And this student was my partner. Since she drew me, I had the opportunity to draw her. So here she is. And you know, because I can see there's a thin line and a thick line, I probably didn't feel like I was done after the first one, but I have no idea why I would have then changed the size of markers unless someone else needed it and I wanted to share or something. So I have this great picture of my student friend. So this is the last example that I'm going to show you. This is also my drawing of a student named Ricardo. I think there's 3 poses in there, if I can see that. And I saw at the end, I just felt like I needed to maybe make some kind of visual stepping stone to go from the top of the figure on the left, his hat, across the page. So I wanted to write his name in there, but I wanted to make sure that the way I touched the page was just the same as my blind contour. So once I figured out, got his spelling right, I looked away at my page and I did like a blind signature as well, where I wrote Ricardo. And then you can see at the bottom I signed it. So it's a totally different handwriting of the way I drew the rest of the drawing. So you want to have that sort of consistency of style all the way out. So if you do decide to put any kind of words in there, you have to look away at the page when you do it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to give you a demonstration of exactly what you're going to do these blind contour drawings.